16 years after the previous entry, Sylvester Stallone returned to the ring for one final round in Rocky Balboa. Of course, it won't be the last time we see the Italian Stallion, but that's a story for another day. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me for one last round is David.
That is one ugly dog.
This is a movie podcast. We have been working through the Rocky franchise. We did the 5 classic movies, although it feels a bit of a questionable choice to refer to 5 as one of the classic ones. But
we did 4 classic movies and the last one.
But, you know, for a long time it was 5 movies. I remember a time when all the Rocky box sets were 5 movies, and then 2006 came along and we got a new movie. And in many ways, Stallone kind of pioneered the nostalgia sequel in some ways because he did both Rocky Balboa and then a couple of years later did Rambo 4, and you know, this was before the era of everything coming back, so there was a bit of a novelty to him doing this. You could be cynical and say he's returning to his 2 most famous characters when he had nothing better to do, but you know, it's fine. But it is interesting coming back to this one because I'd seen it once the year it came out, and I haven't seen it since until today. So it's definitely coming in it with a very different perspective, even if not a different perspective for the franchise itself. Just in general, when I watch a movie from the 2000s that I've not seen in a while now, I do notice it looking like a movie from the 2000s, which is weird because at the time it didn't really feel like the 2000s had like a look or a style, but it's only now in the 2020s where I'm starting to kind of notice it. You always need to, you know, I don't know how quickly the 80s felt like the 80s, but I feel like as soon as I was aware of movies in the mid-90s, 80s movies felt like 80s movies. But for some reason, maybe it's just because I've lived through these decades or whatever, it seems to take longer to like settle in and see this is what a 2000s movie is. This is what it looks like. This is how it feels, so on and so on. But yeah, we'll get into all that stuff. The basic gist of this one is that Rocky gets the itch to come out of retirement and box once again, and the managerial staff for the current world champion decide as an attraction that they would like to make a lot of money on Rocky Balboa versus the current champion, who's the Dixon's his name.
Yes, Mason Dixon, which is right up there in the naming scheme of Tommy Gunn, so good on him.
So that's basically it. I mean, I'll save everything else for spoilers, but obviously time has moved on a little bit. It's actually, what, 30 years exactly after Rocky 1?
I think so.
Yeah, 76 to 2006.
Yeah, but like internally, they don't specifically say.
I don't know about the context inside the movie. I'm just saying the movie came out 30 years after Rocky. The actual timeline of events, I'm not going to even start to try to unpack that.
For everybody in the movie, it's been 30 years, except for Rocky Jr., who, of course, has aged 50 years in that time span.
No, he's in his, I don't know, mid-20s, something like that.
Yeah.
Age is supposed to be. Which I guess you could probably work it out from that, because I mean, actually, that makes it feel like it's only been like 10 years. Maybe 12 years. They messed it up.
They messed it up because of that.
This is the opposite. He should be older now.
Yeah. Absolutely. He showed up and he looks like he's in like his mid to late 20s, and he's talking about like, oh, this is like the first real job I've ever gotten. And I'm like, how old are you supposed to be, man? Because it's supposed to be many years since Rocky 5, but you have only aged 10.
He was 14 in Rocky 5, give or take, and that was 1990. So he should be 30?
Yeah, seems like it, but he's definitely not. He's definitely in his 20s.
No, it definitely feels like it's his first job, his first big job, and he's, you know, the rookie kind of guy, so regardless. But yeah, so yeah, he's a prominent character in the movie, played by Milo Ventimiglia, but we'll get into that in a bit. So, this was your first time, so I'm very curious, what did you think of Rocky Balboa?
Oh gosh, what did I think? Well, I gotta say that up front, this movie has... I honestly believe the longest first act in cinema history. because I was watching this movie and then I was like, oh man, you know, it really feels like we're finally getting into the second act. Let me just check the time. Oh, it's an hour and 10 minutes into the movie. It feels like we're finally getting there. Okay. And, you know, looking at it after the movie's done, I could tell where the first act was supposed to end, but there's just a problem with the structure of this where it doesn't feel like the inciting incident actually incites anything. It's not until we get about an hour in that we get a second inciting incident, and that actually kickstarts the plot. So the fact that out of this hour and 40 long minute movie, this is an hour of it is what I would consider to be setup. You've got some structural issues. That being said, once you get past those structural issues, once we get into like the third act stuff, once we get into the final fight, because of course there's a final fight in this movie, that's not surprising to anybody. I think that there is a actual decent stylistic choice here. I think that it actually does a good job of conveying this fight pretty well. And I also really appreciate the fact that this is a Rocky movie where they actually seem to like really settle on a theme. They have like some arc words that they pick, they repeat, and they make it something that feels like it really matters here for the character. So I think it has an emotional core to it that shines by the end, but ultimately, like, it's really hard to make it past the first hour just because it drags so long the whole time.
Yeah, like I say, it was kind of weird going back to this after all this time, because I remember people being quite positive on it when it came out, and I remember even the vibe of some people being, oh, it's the best one since the first one kind of thing. And watching it now, I do think that I do think at the time the novelty of it was probably helping it a bit, because watching it now, I definitely see a lot of the cracks in the writing in this movie, where there's a lot of moments where it feels like they set something up in one scene, and in the very next scene, a character's just sort of changed their mind about something. That happens a couple of times in this movie. Right. It's also very dour for quite a bit of the runtime, because it's Rocky being sad because it's the anniversary of Adrian's death, which is not a spoiler, like, you know.
No.
The actress didn't come back. I don't know if they made that choice or they asked her to come back and she said no, so they wrote it this way as a result, but...
Trivia basically says it went through several drafts with her being alive, but it was missing an emotional core, so then they just said, hey, would you be cool if we killed off your character? And she's like, yeah, no, I'm good with it.
Yeah, I'll stay home.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's... I think the one thing for me is that because of these jumps where characters just sort of decide things, I think it is lacking that drive of some of the other ones, especially Rocky 1, to compare it to the best sort of like actual drama. But it did kind of feel like this really is just the last hurrah, and the movie's whole purpose is just to go one final round, which kind of works in context because that's kind of what Rocky's goal is in the movie, is just to go one last time. But it does feel a little bit like, and this is very much like a hindsight issue, but Creed exists, and Creed is excellent, and Creed kind of feels like a more natural thing to do with an older Rocky. So doing this story that's kind of in between, this movie almost feels kind of redundant. Like, it's like, okay, yeah, he gets one last fight, but, you know, we're kind of stretching believability a little bit in places or whatever. The fact that the inciting incident for the fight is what it is, we'll talk about that in spoilers, is a little bit funny, especially, again, now that we're, you know, almost 20 years removed from this. Yes, we're all old. Let that settle in.
Yeah.
But, I mean, no, I don't think it's bad. I think there's some nice moments. I do think that there's some stylistic choices that I do like. I think I know what you're talking about. There's some black and white stuff towards the end, which is kind of interesting. I do think, though, there's some stuff early on that felt very of its time in a way that stood out to me as feeling kind of like, oh, that feels inauthentic in a Rocky movie. And it was something just as simple as it was cutting around locations in Philadelphia in the opening, that it was doing this like quick flash, and it's the sort of thing that I remember being on some TV shows around this time and stuff like that, where you would like just stylize the transition by having like a quick flash of a third location before you go to the second location. And it did that a bunch of times as the opening titles were playing, and it felt like super flashy in a way that didn't feel very Rocky, but it does feel very 2006. So
no, yeah, I get that.
Yeah, so I mean,
it reminds me. I think, like, I feel like The Wire did that a little bit. I feel like that was the thing I remember from there.
It's been a while. I don't remember it specifically, but it doesn't sound like a silly statement. So I'll take your word for it. Cool. So yeah, I mean, it's not bad. Like, it's not bad. It's certainly a perfectly watchable, fine movie. But I don't know if I'd say now watching it that it adds much to like the legacy of Rocky beyond just. I mean, the fact that the closing credits are basically just here. There's a bunch of shots of random people running up the steps and like, oh, we're all celebrating the history of Rocky and we're doing all that stuff. That kind of makes me think that it's like, yeah, this is what it is. It's more of a celebration than it is like a movie on its own right, which. It's funny because a lot of nostalgia sequels do kind of end up feeling like that, but I will give this one a little bit of credit because one, it does kind of fit the character's goal in the movie, and two, most of the references, of which there are many to Rocky, one particular, but definitely some of the other ones too, is that, I mean, Rocky's actually going down memory lane because he's feeling reminiscent, and he's actually, like, if it's a bit more natural than just characters are quoting things and so on and so on.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, I don't know. It's weird because it's, even if you go back to the beginning of what the Rocky franchise was, it's this thing of Stallone's life just playing out before our eyes. And I feel like once we get to this point, like you're saying, he brought this back as sort of a nostalgia sequel sort of thing before it was even a thing, but it also just kind of feels like Stallone really wanted to do one last Rocky movie. And it's that same sort of parallel there where it seems like he's bringing back this franchise, and like the story is about that. The story is about him wanting to do one last big old fight like that. So I don't know. It's a weird little parallel into real life as well. But I feel like for me personally, the first half an hour, 45 minutes of this movie, whatever you want to call it, where it is so incredibly dour and it's so incredibly like everything is gone. Everything sucks and Rocky is sad. It just got a bit too much for me. It's not like it wasn't performed well, but it just lasted for a bit too long for me.
Yeah. Yeah, like I say, I think some of the... like I get the motivation for him in general. I just don't know if the movie does a great job of like building to it where we see him realize it. It kind of feels like just between scenes he's decided something. As opposed to, you know, we see the moment where he's like, oh, this, like, I need this. Like, I want this. Because it seems like his life is pretty fulfilling. See, I mean, he's running a restaurant. It's going well. Yeah. Everything seems fine.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's when he gets to the point where he says, like, I want to get back in the ring. It absolutely comes out of nowhere. Like, there's no decisive factor there at all. But I think that everything else up to that point seems pretty well structured in terms of understanding like where he is at in his life. You get a good idea of like, okay, he's sad about Adrian being passed. He hasn't gotten over that. Obviously, he's still living in the past, but for the most part, he is in a pretty good spot overall. And to the fact, again, this is maybe just, it has to exist for the movie to be the way that it is. But like, I cannot imagine a world where everyone in Philadelphia knows about a professional heavyweight boxer from 30 years ago. But like every time he walks down the street, he enters a building, he goes anywhere, everyone's like, hey, Rocky, hey, how's it going? It's like, all right, man, sure. If that's what we need to do. Local
legend, I guess. I accept it in the restaurant, though, because, like, they come, like, presumably people who know who he is come to the restaurant. Because, you know, it really emphasizes that he tells a lot of the boxing stories at the restaurant as part of the whole shtick.
Yeah, absolutely. But, like, at one point, he goes and meets his son at his son's new job. And, like, as he's just standing in the lobby, all these dudes in suits are like, hey, Rocky, how's it going? I'm like, really? You guys are into heavyweight boxing from 30 years ago.
Yeah. To be fair, it's been 20 years since his last match, I think.
All right, fair enough.
Still, I mean, not that makes much of a difference.
I mean, to be fair, maybe they would be interested in the man who single-handedly ended the Cold War.
That's true. He's a legend for many reasons. They can't throw out that. So, yeah. I mean, we'll get into all the other characters and stuff and spoilers. I don't want to get into any of that now. What I did want to bring up, though, is the presentation of this movie, which is realistic, but it kind of took me out of it a little bit. Seeing like the authentic HBO pay-per-view logo pop up and the actual round timer coming up and the commentary sound like a real like modern. I'm assuming these are real commentators from the 2000s. Michael Buffer doing the ring announcing. They made a point of naming the referee, so I assume he's a real referee as well.
Yeah, I mean, also just Mike Tyson just shows up.
Yeah, Mike Tyson's just got a cameo.
Mike Tyson. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's super weird, but like at the same time, I kind of love it and hate it because it does do wonders for the realism that they're going for throughout this. But at the same time, the one thing I was missing was the extra oomph on the punch sounds, because they just go with like realistic sounding taps and hits and stuff like that. I really miss the like extra whoosh and the thud as punches land, and that signals to the audience like, no, this is a big one. So without that, once we get into the fight scenes more explicitly, it just feels a little bit lighter than it has in any previous movie.
I think it's fair to say that in this movie, like, it's the least exciting fight in terms of like caring about winning or the opponent, you know, because like, you know, maybe not counting 5, because 5's like a weird thing with its own different plot, but like all the other ones, both versions of both times he fought Apollo, Clubber and Drago, like all of them for different reasons. Sometimes it was a justice for, you know, someone else, or sometimes it was because he has to prove himself again, or to prove in the first place that he can go a distance. Whatever it was, there was always something like more to the motivation. And here, it doesn't really seem to matter to Rocky who the opponent is all that much, which I guess maybe is kind of the point, but it does make it less exciting. Like, you know, so, yeah.
There's this, without spoiling anything too much, he is very much reluctant in this. He doesn't feel like his whole heart is in this fight going into it. Even once they say, you know, his whole heart is in it, he does want to do this with everything he has. There's no point in the movie where we feel that. There's no point where it gets the point across of like, no, this is really actually something that's important to him now. Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of in a weird place. It's a weird movie where I actually think at this point, and you know, I don't know what I'm going to rate at the end yet, but I think I would put it below the first 4. I think I would say I like 1 through 4 all better than this one.
It's a strange balance to keep for me, because I think that if we're talking in terms of like just sheer enjoyability, I'm agreeing with you, but I think that what you're talking about of when this came out, people were saying that this is like the best Rocky since the first one. I think that this does, once you hit the last like sequence, it does a great job of delivering that sort of emotional high that it wanted to deliver. It does a great job of going out on this triumphant note, and I think that really hits it well.
I will say that I did feel some feelings at points, but I do want to point out that I think a lot of that is them using the score effectively.
Oh, and absolutely.
Like the extra oomphy version they've done here for this one, where it's, you know, it's the same fanfare, but they've just given it a bit more oomph. It feels a bit louder and fuller, and the guitar coming in at one point and all that.
Yeah, they do the opening trumpets, like da 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 da, and I'm like, okay, sounds good. And then the like deep horns hit, and my ear, like my headset, just kind of vibrated a little. I'm like, oh, okay, we got the new upgraded track here.
Yeah, they went all out on that, which, you know, it's cool. Like that's what they should do. They should absolutely do that. But the music does carry a few moments, I thought, towards the end, where like, I'm feeling things here, but I think part of it's because of how good this score always was, and how much it's like just great to hear it in like this context again.
Yeah, but I mean, it still is part of the movie. Like, it's not like it had to consciously make the choice of using that thing, so I'm still going to give it points for it, even if it is a little bit manipulative.
Oh yeah, sure. I'm not saying that it shouldn't count for the movie. I'm saying it makes up for the writing not being as good as it's been in the past, or could be.
Yeah, I'll give you that.
Right. I'm saying it's a crutch in the sense that it's achieving something that the writing isn't achieving, so therefore that sort of points out that the writing needed the help. Now, ideally, it wouldn't need the help, and it would still add that on top, and you'd have the best of both worlds colliding, and it'd feel, you know, like a nice creamy middle, right, if you will. But that's not quite what this is. But it's like, I don't want to sound too negative, because I think it's a perfectly fine movie. It generally has some nice little moments of acting from Stallone, who wrote and directed it as well, we might add. Yes. It's got, you know, a lot of characters returning, some that I was happy to see. I wasn't expecting Duke to show up to be one of his trainers. He
has such a good intro, because it comes out of nowhere and it just nails it.
Yeah, so that was nice. But you know, like I said, there is definitely some kinks in the writing with this one, and it feels like I just wish I was a little bit more invested in the actual fight and why, like, you know, just why I don't know why it's disappointing, but like something that's made Rocky a bit more personally invested in it beyond just, oh, it's one last hurrah.
So I'll bring this up now just because it's not going to influence this movie, but it does influence your point a little bit. Apparently, the original version that Stallone wrote and filmed was like 2.5 hours long. And the studio came in and said, you got to chop that down to 1 hour 45. So a lot of these scenes that we're talking about of decisions very quickly being made and not feeling attached to certain aspects of it, I feel like might have been fixed in that original cut.
See, that's the thing though, like when I hear that, what I instantly think, and maybe one day they'll do a director's cut. He did a director's cut of 4, so why not Balboa? Like, why not let him just do it? Because it's not like a movie where they'd have to finish a lot of effects, I don't think, for the most part.
No, definitely not.
So,
I mean, they brought back the robot, so that would be weird, but...
You know, like maybe if some of it's like... I mean, I assume not a lot of it was in the fight where they'd have to have like the CG like crowd or the green screen crowd behind them, but other than that, everything's just a drama, so... But regardless, when I hear that, I'm like, okay, that may actually fix some of the writing issues, but I could see it feeling too long at 2.5 hours.
Yeah. Like, especially if there is any point in the beginning section before we get to the second inciting incident, because already that is an hour into the movie. You push that to the 1.5 hour mark or something, I'm checking out, man. I can't deal with that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. So... Yeah, I mean, I think we'll get into... I know we usually go through... There's a couple of characters I don't want to mention till spoilers, so which is why I'm not going through the rest of the cast.
That's fair. I mean, without mentioning any of the characters individually, I will say that I don't think any of the new characters really stood out to me.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think that everyone that's returning, they did a good job of fleshing out and all that. I'm split on Rocky Jr. I think there are scenes that he does very poorly, and I think there are scenes that he does better in. So I'm very split on whether or not he does a decent job. But like Paulie, Rocky, Duke, for whatever he's in it, they all do a great job where they're at.
Paulie's just still Paulie, for better or worse.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. There's a point in this where Paulie like asks about setting up a sponsorship or whatever for when the fight cut's going. I was like, there he is. That's the guy I remember trying to make a quick dime.
He also just walks into Rocky's restaurant and just pours himself some booze from the bar, and I think Rocky just lets him do it. He's like, nah, just he's family. He can come in and have a drink. It's fine. Yeah. And he also mentions in that scene that he's, you know, stopping off on the way to work, which just makes it all the more perfect that he's doing this. So spoilers for Rocky Balboa. You've been warned in case you haven't seen the movie. Although I suspect most of you probably have, since it's a, you know, it's I mean, even this is an old movie now. You know, I mean, I don't really think of anything after 2000 as being old, but in the sense that it's been almost 20 years, it's, you know.
I specifically don't think of anything after 2000 being old unless it's a sci-fi movie that didn't know what special effects it could handle. Those things feel old.
Wow.
Like you look back at the early 2000s and it's like, oof, no, please.
I feel like, I mean, maybe I'm splitting hairs here, but there is, whatever that may be, that's dated, not old. There's a difference.
Okay. All right.
Even though I realized that those words basically mean the same thing.
This is just that talk we had with, I think it was during our Romulus review of what counts as a prequel and what just counts as set earlier in the timeline.
Yes. Anyway, so, like, I'm just going to say, if Stallone had balls, okay?
That's a strong statement to start on, but all right.
If Stallone had any balls, he would have started this movie like all the other sequels with showing the final fight from the previous film at the start as the titles played out, but he doesn't because he's a coward. Okay?
That's fair. I would have loved to see the Tommy gun fight out on the street and him punching out that promoter. That would have been how you open the movie. Yeah.
Do you know, it's funny, knowing that, like, because you said that they could have had Adrian back and decided not to have her back, given that she was willing to come back, I'm surprised they didn't do, like, a You remember when he saw Mickey, like in that sort of flashback dream kind of moment? I'm surprised they didn't do that with her, since she's dead, but the actress was still willing.
Yeah, I feel like it was probably one of those things where, like, if they, like, this movie, we haven't mentioned, it uses a lot of archive footage. Like, every single time that Rocky gets to a location in Philadelphia, it goes this deep blue hue, and then we get some archive footage. I feel like they just didn't want to have to do, A, they didn't want to bring in Adrian's actress just to do a couple scenes of that, but B, obviously she would have aged just as much as Rocky did, as just as much as Stallone did. And I imagine they were trying to keep this idea of like a perfect memory, like how she was in the first movie, rather than how she ended up looking nowadays.
Mean, to be fair, she only died in 2002, so it's okay she looks the same age as Rocky, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you know, so she didn't die that long ago in terms of the movie timeline. Which, I mean, that basically confirms it's 2006, more or less. Like, because the tombstone says she died in 2002. I mean, it could have been just a year later, I guess, but it probably, I mean, 4 years sounds normal enough.
Yeah, I think there was a point where Paulie said something like, oh, you've been doing this the past couple years or something like that.
Yeah, so. I think he said something like that. So, yeah, the opening like footage is just showing off who the champion is and seeing some of his fights, and we don't really get much, I don't think, here, except that we do hear that he gets booed and that the people are not behind him. That's what we find out.
Like, I get it from a certain extent. It sounds to me like he is kind of in the same position that, like, Tommy Gunn was at the end of Rocky V, where, like, you know, he's not exactly a champion that, like, has a lot of respect of he earned this. It feels like he's been given a lot of lightweight opponents and stuff, no one that can really stand up to him. But it also doesn't sound like it's his fault. It sounds like there's literally nobody else on his level.
Yeah. So his managers want something to make money, and they're saying, hey, do this, do that. You know, so that kind of comes into it as the movie goes. But Rocky's story, you know, we see him wake up. He's got his turtles still in the tank. He's got a similar hat. I really appreciated they gave him the same kind of look that he's always had from the first movie, but it's not the same jacket. You know, it's not a leather jacket anymore. It's just like, okay, he still dresses the same and it's got a similar hat, but it's not the exact same items.
It's not Rocky V of him opening up a chest and saying, hey, look what I found, and putting it back on again.
Although I wonder if they were just forced because they wouldn't fit anymore, because Stallone obviously just changed shape.
I mean, the hat would probably still fit if he wanted to. I'd imagine they probably have just degraded. Like,
maybe it's not realistic. But, you know, he goes to visit Adrian's grave. Paulie's there. Paulie mentions, the son should be here, and Rocky sort of sticks up, no, he's busy, he's got things to do. So that kind of like teases that relationship and what they've got going on. And Rocky makes Paulie promise that he'll come tonight to whatever that is, which ends up turning out that every year on Adrian's like anniversary of her death, he goes around Philadelphia to all the locations, you know, the gym, the pet shop, the ice rink, although it's been torn down, so it's just a heap of rubble, yes. And just reminisces, and we get little flashback moments. There's even a moment where he goes to where he used to live, and he looks down the steps to where Adrian was standing, and they actually impose the flashback into the scene, so it's like she's like a ghost standing.
You got a force ghost of Adrian standing there. It's not like, it makes it clear that it's all flashbacks, it's all in his head. It's not unsettling that we're getting these moments, and it does it pretty well for an emotional beat. But again, it's like a solid 10-15 minutes of just going around the city and him just saying like how sad he is and how miserable, like how upset he is that his wife died. And I get it, that makes sense from a character sense, but like, I'm here for gotta fly now. Go fly now.
I don't know, I'm conflicted, because on the one hand, I kind of appreciate that they set up from the start that this is who he is, that this is routine for him, he always does this, and it makes sense, it fits his character that he would do this. But at the same time, I think there would be strength in not addressing where she is until it comes out at some point in the movie. Maybe that's more common to do it that way, but you sort of reveal later on. Like, I get that we start the movie and end the movie effectively at her grave.
Right.
And maybe there's a nice bookend to that, but I wonder if maybe there'd be some power in not seeing the grave until you know, the end of the movie or something like that. I don't know. I'm just like, sometimes like, less is more, and he lays it on thick here with all this stuff.
Like, I could imagine a version where, like, we see just an average day in the life for him of, like, running the restaurant, meeting up with Paulie, maybe trying to talk to his son. And there's just this overarching thing of, like, everyone he talks to, he says, like, by the way, I'm going to be busy tomorrow. I'm seeing Adrian. And, like, they just mention that. And it's like, oh, okay. And then when you finally get to the graveyard, it's like, oh, he's seeing her in the sense that she's dead, sort of thing.
Yeah, and, you know, when we introduce the son, Rocky shows up at his work, which kind of suggests that he's not very good at picking up the phone with his dad or something, and that's why he always has to come down and kind of confront him like this. But he sees his son being chewed out a bit by his boss, you know, whether or not it's justified or not. Like, clearly Rocky doesn't like it, and I'm like, oh, is he thinking about punching him? He's thinking about it. He's thinking about it.
The boss comes in, and he's just like, now, look, you may think that you're going to get an easy pass because your last name's Balboa. I'm like, that's enough for an easy pass? Wow, all right, cool.
Well, it turns out he's a fan, because when he sees Rocky's there, he wants a photo with him.
Which, if he's a fan, great, awesome, but, like, he sure as hell doesn't show it to the son. No. So, yeah, but it sets up this idea that Robert is conflicted. He doesn't like, you know, being under his dad's shadow. He hates that he's defined as being Rocky's son as opposed to just being him. And that's obviously a running thing that we're going to explore a little bit throughout the movie. So, you know, these things are set up. And, you know, I actually wanted some of my favorite stuff in the first half, though, is seeing that Rocky has a restaurant, seeing him put on the blazer, talk to people. In fact, actually, one of the nice little touches that I think is a really good little link to nostalgia, but feels like it's in a different context, is that he goes round the food market and like buys supplies for his restaurant, and he's like talking to the people, the locals. He's saying, I trust you, I'll pay this for that, and he's getting fruit, veg, whatever. And he loads up the van, and I had this realization, like, yeah, this is the market he ran through in Rocky, but now he's going back to it and giving them business, because it's like, oh, he's a man of the local community. And that all made sense to me. It felt like it fit his character and was like a nice idea. You know what they should have done? They should have had him go up to a fruit stand and then, like, buy a single fruit and then hand him, like, the cash and say, keep the change, just to cover that one fruit that was tossed to him all those years ago.
I mean, I know you're joking, but that's too on the nose.
Is it? That's too on the nose? All right.
That's
sorry.
Yeah, well, of course, this isn't that on the nose. This is fine. This is...
Oh, no. The market part's fine. I'm talking about other aspects of the movie.
Oh, no. I'm not... Yeah.
Lead in.
Yeah, well, we'll get to those. I think this is... I think this is a nice way to kind of loosely tie up, like, the idea that he's still a part of this community. So, yeah. So
I like the restaurant bits where, you know, he puts on the blazer, and you said that he, like, shares a story with people sitting here, but I love how the first one that they show him sharing the story, they know the words to the story. Like, they're finishing his sentences, and it just implies he's been doing this and, like, sharing the exact same Glory Days stories over and over to the exact same people for God knows how long now.
Since 1995, because it said established in 1995 on the sign.
All right, well, there you go.
Which is so only 5 years after. I wonder then, does that mean that Adrian was like the front desk person, like for while she's alive? I could see her working here.
I mean, the name of the restaurant is Adrian's, so maybe she was the one who incorporated it, and Rocky just kind of inherited it afterwards.
I don't know. Rocky is the guy that will name his boat after his wife. Like, he is absolutely that guy.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, so, and we also see the concierge. She's pregnant, which is not a big detail, but it just is. It comes up for the fact that he needs to replace her later on. Well, not permanently. He's not a dick boss who's firing her for being pregnant. But
what's this FMLA leave? Get out of here. We don't need you. One little detail here is as he's setting up the restaurant, like opening it for the day, they have a little tiny lunch rush, and Spider Rico is there. And I don't know if you even remember Spider Rico. Do you have any idea who that is?
I do not know who that is, no.
Spider Rico was the dude that Rocky was fighting in the very, like, opening shots of Rocky 1. He was the guy who was the, like, initial dude that they split that tiny little paycheck with.
I did not recognize the name, but so yeah, he basically sits there and eats for free, and then he feels bad later in the movie, so he starts doing dishes and stuff, and Rocky's like, you don't have to do that. He's like, no, I'm paying my way, I'll do dishes and shit. It's sweet. It's just Rocky being Rocky. It's all very nice.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, it sets up his life, sets up all this stuff, and you know, I think one of the things that I do like about him going around reminiscing, though, I do appreciate Polly being there and sort of saying, this is kind of sad, like, why do you keep doing this and living in the past? Kind of, it did kind of feel like he was the voice of the audience there for a minute, which was kind of nice, which is weird for Polly, because that's not normally the role he fills, but...
No, but I like the way that they frame it, though, in that it's not that he's telling Rocky, like, you know, this is unhealthy because Polly is a actual, like, good psychiatrist or anything like that. No, it's specifically because he's like, yeah, those were your glory days, but those days kind of sucked for me, and I'd rather not hang out with you reliving them every single year.
Well, the detail...
I'd rather, like, do something else.
Yeah, the detail I liked when he was saying that, though, is that, yeah, these memories are good for you because, you know, you loved my sister and she loved you, but I was not good to her, and I don't want to remember that. And I thought that was actually kind of a nuanced little character beat from Polly. And it's like, I mean, you're making very little effort to change, admittedly, and that's always been your problem. Also, Rocky would be like a millionaire right now if it wasn't for you. So that's also an issue.
You'd still have your robot wife if this this didn't fall through.
But yeah, like, I thought that was a kind of a nuanced little point. So there's good stuff in there in this opening section. It just, it is a bit dour overall. But
yeah,
where it kind of starts to progress into sort of new material and it gets it, and I did not see, well, I'd seen this before, but I'd forgotten this, but
yeah.
Remember the girl that Rocky said the word whore to 12 times in Rocky 1? She's a main character in Rocky Balboa.
This blew my goddamn mind.
I actually laughed when I realized, because obviously he goes into this bar, it's the bar I used to go to, and it's kind of changed, there's some unpleasant people or whatever. And he goes up and says, oh, he's just, you know, looking around the old neighborhood. And she's like, you sure you don't want a drink? And he gets one. And then she brings up who she is. Like, oh, you walked me home one time. And when I realized who this was, I started laughing because we were cracking so many jokes about how much his heart was in the right place. But the way he said his advice was pretty rough. So, yes. But yes, this forms a new friendship of sorts here.
Yeah, all right, so we'll talk more about their relationship as the movie progresses.
Yes.
But I love the fact that they specifically brought up, like, hey, remember you walked me home once? And he's like, and they bring up the line of screw you, creepo. and Rocky's even like, you don't forget an insult like that. That sticks with you.
I'm like, really? That one stuck? All right.
Yeah. As it turns out, the 5 Rocky movies prior to this had nothing to do with him, like, trying to go the distance, trying to win over Adrian, nothing like that. It's all just been trying to impress Marie, trying to not be a creepo anymore.
I'm not a creepo. No, I think, so this scene does have something that I don't like, though, mainly for the performance. But, so there's this group of people, and they send over, like, it's like one guy and like 3 women, and he sends over a woman to basically charm Rocky into buying them all drinks because he's a successful boxer. He should have money. He can buy us all around. And, you know, Rocky sort of recognizes that she's been edged on by this guy, and he kind of like tries to like say, hey, don't let that guy, like, you know, control you or whatever he says.
Hey, look, the only thing you got to protect is your rep, because otherwise you're going to be seen as a whore.
But yeah, he tries to sort of give advice, but this woman just gets offended. Like, you know, she sounds exactly what you think she'd sound like, where she says, well, you think you're better than me? What are you saying? You looking out for me?
You don't know me.
Right? But and I'm not necessarily blaming the actress per se, but the writing combined with the performance, whether it's her fault or just how she was directed, is just so two-dimensionally cartoony that I just, like, you know, it took me out of the moment a little bit. There's a couple of small roles like that in this movie where it took me out. I don't remember off the top of my head what the other one was. I'm hoping it'll come back to me when we get to whatever scene it is. But there was definitely a couple of little roles like this where I'm like, ugh, like that little moment did not work. Yeah.
I mean, it's weird because, strangely enough, this isn't the last time we see this character in this movie.
No, because Rocky, the angel that he is, wins over everyone, and he wins over this woman by the end. He never speaks to her again, but he wins her over anyway.
Yeah. Rocky could just do anything. He could just think good thoughts, and immediately all of Philadelphia's like, we love you, man.
So yeah, he offers Marie a ride home, although he does get out and kind of, you know, not rough up, but he just kind of like grabs the guy who's heckling them from inside the bar and says, you know, do you want to apologize to Lee? Because I think he yells something at Marie for going home with him. But he gives her a lift home, and sees the place she's living in. It's kind of like a really shitty like place in an old neighborhood where the other apartment buildings are all pretty like just abandoned, really. So she's got the one place that's still functioning and the others are just kind of empty.
Yeah.
Right? But, you know, we learned that she's got a son, who Rocky meets here briefly. It's an interesting little moment, actually, because she offers the chance to meet her son, because he's standing over in the corner. And there's a little joke here, because he assumes the white kid's her son, but it turns out to be the black kid. But he says, nah, you know, I need to get going, it's alright, I'll just go. But then there's just a little moment where he's walking back to the van, and he sort of turns around and sees them, and it's almost like he realized he was doing something like un-Rocky-like, and sort of like, you know, the heart didn't let him do it, and he went back and sort of introduced himself to Steps, her son, which is a nickname. It's Steven, I think, was the actual name, but
yeah, it's like Stevenson or something, and I'm like, look, Rocky from Robert, I've slowly accepted over time. Steps from Stevenson, nah, that's not gonna work.
Yes, and this kid like just gives him a stare, like, "Are you trying to bang my mum?" That's what I saw in this kid's eyes.
Yeah, so let's just talk about that, because like maybe this is just a cultural thing. Maybe it is the sort of issue of if you put a leading man and a leading woman on screen together, you expect them to have a romantic relationship. But like this movie plays it as they are friends, and they address it very early on of saying like, hey, like, it's not going to happen. And he's like, yeah, no, totally not going to happen. Like, I'm still getting over my wife. And they never deliver on it. They never go that distance to make it a romantic relationship. But I feel like every single encounter they have in this movie is coded to be a romantic setup.
I mean, just to clarify one thing you said there, he didn't just say it's never going to happen. He specifically says that's not something he's looking for.
Okay,
and she also agrees. Yeah, I didn't really think that. So it's not even that. Oh, it maybe could happen if it was, you know, if circumstances were different. No, like he's not looking for that. She never even thought he was looking for that. So they make it clear in no uncertain terms. This was never a romance, and it was never going to be. I was just joking. I think the kid probably thought that during this scene.
But like I was thinking that too throughout the movie. There was a part right before we get into the final fight where he's in a hotel room. She comes and knocks on the door, and he like offers to let her in. And again, everything about the scene in any other movie would be screaming, this is where the romantic tension finally pays off.
Rocky's too innocent. Inviting her in when she came to see him was not an invitation for sex. I guarantee you.
Obviously not. But like, it's so weird because as written, it just seems like that to me. Also, there was one tiny little line I had to bring up here just because it was possibly the best laugh I got out of the movie. And it was as she's saying like, yeah, my kid is the black one. He's on the. Oh,
I know what you're gonna say. Yeah, go on.
And he's like, oh yeah, who's his father? And he's just like, oh yeah, he's just some guy. He's Jamaican. And Rocky goes, oh, Jamaican, European. All right. And I'm like, bravo, beautiful line.
Yes, Jamaica and Europe. What?
Yeah.
Oh dear. It didn't make me laugh. I can't deny it didn't make me laugh because it did. So. Yeah, I think she definitely is like a fill-in for Adrian in the sense that she is, you know, not only does she literally give him a photograph of Adrian that she swiped from the restaurant towards the end of the movie as like a, hey, she'll give you good luck kind of thing, but she's even the one in the crowd looking up when he's in the match and, you know, like, I mean, he hugs many
every time he gets hit and cheering at the end.
He hugs many people, admittedly, at the end, but she's one of the people that he hugs at the end after the match. And so they definitely wanted to go for this, like, I wouldn't say daughter figure, but like definitely something different. You know, it kind of feels like, you know, like he kind of like steps back into her life, and it's like, hey, I can help her, and you know, sometimes it's in little ways, like fixing the light bulb on her porch, which, you know, like, because you get it, things are a little bit brighter when Rocky's around. You know.
Yeah. I, honest to God, all the like he as you're saying, it's kind of a mentor thing, it's kind of a daughter thing going on, but then we also see him get involved in Step's life as well, being sort of father figure to him as well. So all of this was just suffice to say to me, Rocky will do literally anything to bond with people who are not his son.
That's a fair point. No, I mean, I think this is kind of like him getting back in the ring. I think it's been a long time since he's helped someone, and I think this is him returning to the things that have made him feel like a good person in the past. And I think, you know, offering Steps a small, you know, part-time job at the restaurant, and eventually offering Marie the front desk job, because obviously the current girl's going on maternity leave. And I actually really like that scene on its own, right? Just to sort of skip ahead to that, because she says, she gets kind of awkward and wants to go back inside, and one of the lines she says is, "Oh, you really want me to be the first thing people see when they walk into your restaurant?" And it really sold this idea of how she sees herself.
Right.
And I really like that, because it ties back into Rocky in the first movie of his own self-worth. And she feels, so him making this speech to convince her to take that job and give it a try, and that she could do it, she could be great. Yes, there's more qualified people out there who have done it at other places that I could hire, but I'm offering you this chance. I'm giving someone a chance to do something better than what they've currently got. And I thought that line was quite pointed. It made the themes of like him working with her and helping her, and even just worrying over her son, because the son clearly doesn't like him that much at first, but you know, by the time he says, "Hey, let's go and help me come and adopt a dog," and of course, I will say the writing in the "we're picking a dog" scene was really on the nose, because like, oh, he's an old dog, he's useless, he's basically dead. It's like, you know, if you give him a couple of new friends, wink, wink, like just like Rocky's had a couple of new friends, you know, he can get back on his feet again. You know, it's very on the nose, the writing in that scene.
Oh, absolutely. And then they end up naming the dog Punchy, and it's just like, yeah, okay, sure.
Yeah, so, which is not, I you know, I'm making fun of that a little bit, but it's not, like, it's perfectly fine. Like, I don't think Stallone's lost sight of, like, what he's trying to say about the character or anything like that. It's just that some of the things maybe come off as a bit in the cheesier side, versus, you know, I would say that if this movie's guilty of something compared to the first Rocky, which they're both trying to be dramas, is this one is way, way, way oversweetened with sentiment, I guess, versus the first one, which was more like, no, this is about this person feeling this thing and overcoming it. Whereas this movie has got this sheen all over it.
Oh, yeah.
So
this movie is 100% supposed to be the love letter to the Rocky franchise.
Yeah.
Like, it is absolutely supposed to be like, look, we know you love him, so we're just going to spend this entire movie making everything perfect for Rocky.
Which actually, on this, I was kind of alluding to this way back at the start of the review, actually, about how movies looked in the 2000s. But this one does feel a little bit more sterile visually than the others. Like, there's kind of a... For some reason, in the 2000s, there was this really big trend in movies to have really harsh, like, white light hitting the actors. And I was really noticing it, even just some stuff on the street when he's talking to Polly earlier on, but when he's training later on and they're in the gym and he's with Duke and all that, like, sometimes he's just got this, like, bright white light, like, sort of, like, blowing out, like, this, the rim or side of his face. And it's just got this very kind of sterile feel to it, just a little bit desaturated, so...
Yeah, no, honestly, obviously it's because of, like, time release and stuff like that, but it reminded me a lot of, like, Expendables 1 sort of time period. That's just kind of like the visual style for it. Yeah,
it's about 4 years after this, so yeah, it's not too far away. Yeah, you know, it makes, and obviously that'll work for certain things, don't get me wrong, but it reminds me of, like, I don't know, Black Hawk Down or something like that, so, you know. Yeah,
that's the thing, is it kind of, as much as it's trying to show that, like, Philadelphia, much like Rocky himself, is starting to, like, run down, it's starting to get a bit more, you know, all these buildings and these monuments and whatnot have disappeared. They took away Rocky's statue from the top of the steps. But the lighting and the way it's shot, like you said, it feels more sterile. So you don't actually feel the idea that, like, Philadelphia is breaking down. It feels, if anything, like it's a bit more clean because
sleek.
Because a bunch of times the only things we see are, like, the newly built, like, skyscrapers and office buildings and stuff like that.
I mean, I think it was definitely trying to point out that the part of the city son lives in and goes to work is the urban part that's bustling and it's full of people, but South Philadelphia, where Rocky comes from, is the rundown, like, you know, streets and tenements and things like that.
Yeah.
Well, it's just fine. Like, that's all, you know, the attention to detail there is solid enough. But the visual style maybe just feels a bit, it's like, maybe like trying to just be more visually like Rocky and less just 2006 would have maybe helped it out a little bit. But
yeah, that's fair.
But, you know, I don't know, like, how effective that'd have been. So, is there anything else to say about Marie, really, up in the first half?
Up to this point, no, not really. It's spite to say, by the time we hit the half-hour mark, both her and Steps are pretty much all in on Rocky. They're like, yeah, we're good. We like him. He's cool.
They like Rocky. She doesn't know how to respond when Polly comes in with booze, or comes in and gets booze. And Rocky's just like, oh, he's a relative, which I guess is technically, he's a brother-in-law. I guess that's technically true. It's maybe a bit of a stretch, but that's fine.
But yeah, so then we're about half an hour into the movie, and this is where what I would call the first inciting incident is, which we see that ESPN is doing a theoretical matchup of the current heavyweight champion with Rocky in his prime, and they're using computer graphics and all this extra stuff to show how the match would have gone.
It's a simulation, and it looks like a video game of like a star from a yesteryear going against the star of today, and like they actually have pundits, and I assume these are all real people from ESPN, because why not have cameos? But they're all saying, that I think Rocky will win because of this, but some of the things, of course, that the champ Dixon sees that he really doesn't like before the simulation even starts is that one or two of them are like, yeah, Dixon's never really had a real challenger. She's never had a real fight, so I don't think he would stand. He would stand a chance against a real fighter. And like, Dixon's like, what the hell did he just say? What did he just say about me?
Especially when they say, and by the way, Rocky ended the Cold War, so
yeah, what's the Mason Dixon line ever done for us? Which by the way, he's Mason the Line Dixon, so they're really playing it up.
I live like 30 minutes away from the Mason Dixon line, so the moment I saw his name being said, I'm like, ha, very funny, but then they keep going.
Obviously their parents. I'm assuming the actor Antonio Tarver, is he a real boxer?
He is a boxer first and an actor second, because this is the only thing he ever started.
I can kind of tell. It's not that his performance is bad, it's that there's not a lot to it. He's just kind of a tough guy, pretty much, and that's really all he's got going on. Like, the one sort of character bit they have from all in the fact that he wants to prove everyone wrong that they're saying all this stuff is that he used to have a trainer that he was happy with, that he respected. We see a scene where he goes to visit him and talk to him about what he's going through. But he's with these money men now, and the money men keep trying to give him these fights, and they've built this image. They've basically, they're the ones who are responsible for turning him into a villain in the eyes of the public. Yeah. So
it's kind of just the rehash and logical extension of the Tommy Gunn plot from Rocky V. It's like, okay, but let's skip the part where he betrays Rocky and just go straight to the point where he's all in on the cash and he's got all this fancy tech and stuff.
Yeah. And because of this simulated thing, Rocky he doesn't see the actual simulation. We see his son see it in the bar, and he's kind of awkward because all his friends are saying, look at this. Yeah. We got Rocky Jr. over here.
They're sitting at a bar. Plenty of people there, all having fun or whatever. And then ESPN is on quietly on the TV. And one of Rocky Jr.'s co-workers sees like his father pop up on screen, and he's like, hey, turn it up. And the whole bar goes silent as everybody watches this ESPN not a real fight, mind you, a simulated fight that just computers made up. And I'm like, yeah, no, clearly everybody pauses when Rocky Balboa is on screen.
It's really funny watching movies that have cutting edge tech in them, but now we're like almost 2 decades later. So I don't know, there's just a weird feeling. There's something weird about seeing what was cutting edge tech at the time, and they were showing it off all fancy. Yeah. But now it's like, oh, this looks ancient.
That was the boss character wanted a picture with Rocky, and so he handed Rocky Jr. his flip phone, and I was like, oh, right. You poor little thing.
This is right before the smartphone era.
Yeah.
Right, okay, so it sets that up, and obviously the champ sees it, Rocky's son sees it, and we don't find out until a little bit after, but when Paulie comes in and gets a drink, he's like, hey, they're going to talk more about that cartoon fight. And I actually did think that was a good choice of dialogue for him. I think Paulie would call it a cartoon fight. That sounds right. And Rocky's like, what are you talking about? And he sees like the clip of it, and then hears them talking about, and someone saying, oh, it's not a real fight, it takes out the human element, just because in theory, Rocky might win doesn't mean he actually could go even in his prime. And this is really like the spark, effectively, of what's going to make Rocky want to get back in the ring. But this is actually my first big problem in the movie, is that it just kind of is instant, and it's not like, I don't know, it's like just all of a sudden I can't remember if he goes to see his son first, he goes to talk to Paulie in the back alley first, but whatever one it is, he says, "Oh yeah, I think maybe I could do some local fights. Maybe just get back in the ring a little bit."
It's like immediate. He sees the cartoon fight and he immediately like goes to his son's house, camps out there until he gets home from work, and then is like, "I was hoping that maybe you'd be okay with me fighting a little bit." And his son's just like, "No, don't do. You're like 70, dude. Don't go back in there."
60, I think. I mean, if you go by 30 in Rocky 1, he should be. Although I think later on they mention fighters in their 50s, so I'm assuming that he's not quite hit 60 yet in the movie's timeline.
Probably high 50s. But regardless, he just points out, like, "You're old, Dad," and I'm getting a feeling this might... Like, I saw the cartoon fight. I know that you have probably, like, an ego thing going on right now. Just don't give into it. Let it rest. Call me tomorrow.
I mean, I don't hate this, because I think... Because Rocky always wanted approval from Adrian to let him feel like it was okay, and that gave him, like, the fire to go do it. So him seeking approval from his son, I think, makes sense in a lot of ways. And I also don't hate that, while his son's advice is largely correct, there is also a part of it that's been very selfish because he hasn't like been overshadowed by his father, and he's like, hey, this will just put the focus on you again and overshadow me even more. So some of it, even though he's right about a lot of what he's saying, he's also, the well's kind of poisoned with this other part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I get what he's saying in that he wants... Here's the thing that I have a problem with the whole Rocky Jr. plot, is that I understand him feeling overshadowed by his dad. Like, people hear his name and then think, oh, your dad, I know about that guy. But it's weird to me that they are doing this plot where his job is something as menial as, like, data entry or whatever. Like, it's a white-collar job rather than something that is more public-facing. Like, if it were something that were, acting, music, anything like that, where, like, he's trying to make it big and everyone's just accusing it of nepotism, then I'd be like, yeah, no, absolutely, be upset by it. But corporate America, I don't think they really care if your dad's a heavyweight boxer.
Yeah.
It just seems weird to me.
Yeah. Also, I just looked up Geraldine Hughes, who plays Marie. I was curious about her age when they made this. She's actually about a decade too young to be playing that character, if you go by the age she was in Rocky 1.
Yeah, I can feel that.
Yeah.
It seems reasonable.
Yeah, because she was like 15 or something in that first movie.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you really think about it, like, how much... Rocky Jr. is the one that's throwing a wrench into all this, because I'm basing the ages around him. You think about how old she is compared to Rocky Jr., and then how old her son is compared to Rocky Jr., and none of it lines up.
Yeah, that's true, that's true. Yeah, she should be, like, in her, like, about 45 or so, right? Yeah. At this point. But she's the actress, at least, I mean, admittedly, she may be playing older, but, like, the actress was about 35, 36 when she made the movie. So, it's not a big deal. Like, it's like, honestly, once you get to that age, it's not a huge, like, visual difference, really. But it's just, again, we're questioning the timeline here of things. Yeah. And it's just something else to not quite fit with everything going on. But, yeah, so he also talks to Polly and asks if Polly wants to come help him train, and Polly's like, nah, I mean, I got a job, which, by the way, he's back working at Shamrock Meats.
Not only is he working at Shamrock's Meats, and he's like, yeah, no, I got a job, I'm happy here. He's just painting a portrait in the middle of this freezer. Like, he's just going nuts on a canvas, and I'm like, what is your job here? What is it you say you do here?
That's a great question. He gets laid off a little bit later in the movie, though, and all I could think was, because you're standing around doing a painting instead of your job.
I'm pretty sure he was painting as the people who laid him off walked in. Like, he wasn't doing anything. Yeah,
I almost wanted, like, a scene where he's like, why me? And they just sort of, like, look over at the portrait and go, well, you've been a little distracted, Polly, to be honest.
They look over at the collection of portraits lining the walls.
Oh dear. And he ends up going to the restaurant, and he wants to get drunk. He says he's celebrating because he's retired. And Rocky's like, wait, you've got a big slab of meat. Since when did you get that instead of a watch? And then he actually references that Rocky gave him a watch and yells, you gave me a watch.
And you threw it on the ground and smashed it and told Rocky to leave it there. So you don't have a watch anymore, Polly.
But he ultimately... He gets on board, of course. We later find out at the press conference, once the fight is set up, that Duke is on board. Yes, Duke is on board. But in between all of this, because, okay, so you said the spark happened right when he saw the computerized fight.
And yes, I would agree that that's where his little journey began. But I would still say...
It's a spark of him wanting to get back in the ring. I wouldn't say it's a spark of, like, you know, leading to the fight directly.
Right, and that's the thing, is that we're about 45 minutes in now. So 15 minutes have passed since I would say the inciting incident. But we're still not in the plot yet. We still feel like we're setting things up. So the next thing that happens is apparently he does all these tests and whatnot because he needs to get licensed to become a boxer again. And he gets in front of this panel of people who basically said, well, we got your medical test back. You're clear, but we're not going to let you box anyway because you're too damn old.
And Rocky gives an impassioned speech about how, you know, you gave me the seed of hope that if I pass all these tests, I would get cleared, and you're not doing it anyway. Where's the pride? That's not right. If someone works hard for what they want and they believe in it, then they should have it. And he gives this big speech, which apparently is enough to turn all these old bastards sentimental because they let him in anyway.
There's two things with this scene. One, his speech, he literally talks about like the frickin' Bill of Rights and how the founding fathers signed it down the street. So if you're going to go big, go big. Secondarily, can we just point out the fact that like the dude says, oh yeah, you passed all your medical things with flying colors. Didn't bro have brain damage that was gonna kill him?
Yeah, I like as soon as I was starting the movie, I was cynically in my head going, I know he's going to end up fighting by the end of this, but in Rocky 2, he was told that if he got punched in the eye bad again, he'd go blind. And then in Rocky 5, he's told that he basically has brain damage, and if he takes one more shot to the head, it could just put him in a coma forever. And I'm like, I know some things do heal over time, like athletes will, you know, like I've seen it with wrestlers where it's like, oh, it's career ending, you can't go back, your neck's too bad of a shape. But then they take 10 years off, and it's like, oh, your neck's actually healed, you're fine to go again, and you're still young enough that you could go for a bit, and they come back. It does happen. I don't know if I'm buying that the brain damage thing, though, got better.
All right, are you ready for this?
Oh, God.
In the original cut, I barely have details here, but there's a single sentence that says one of the things that was cut was, quote, Rocky's brain damage being shown to have not actually have been brain damage. So I guess those doctors just messed up and he never actually had brain damage back then.
I love the idea that Rocky's a bit of an idiot, so they assumed he had brain damage.
Yeah.
But
it's like, well, your brain's like 4 times smaller than it should be. And he's like, yeah, what about it?
Honestly, it is like just like a plot hole you have to let go to enjoy the movie, because like he should not be, it should be dangerous for him, not even just because he's age, but because of his injuries that we were told he had before. He should not be able to do this, but he is. So
I mean, we also let go the fact that he was going to go blind if he got punched in the head one more time. So I'm okay with it. I'm willing to let it go. It just was weird to me that they specifically said passed with flying colors, because like maybe he shouldn't have been passing that well. Maybe it should have been like squeaked by a little bit.
Yes. Do you know what it is? He's been eating a lot of his own Italian food at the restaurant. It's built up some strong bones, some strong brains. Whatever.
I forget what streaming service it's on, but as we've been doing this season, every once in a while I go on a streaming service and they had that, I forget what the name of the show is, but it's like the Stallone reality show with him and his like daughters and all that sort of stuff going on. And I've almost been tempted to watch it just because I'm like, how has the Rocky series continued? If everything's been matching up 1-to-1 with Stallone's life over time, I want to know how Rocky would have continued. But then I watch about like 10 seconds of a trailer. I'm like, oh, this sucks. I don't ever want to see this again.
That's reality TV in a nutshell. Yeah, so we get to this point where he's been approved, and because it becomes public knowledge that he's been approved for a boxing license, immediately the money men for Dixon are like, this is a great idea, Dixon. This could make a lot of money, pay-per-view, and it would be an easy fight, you know, exhibition, all that stuff.
Dixon approaches it realistically as, you want me to beat up a 60-year-old man?
Yeah, to be fair, his reaction is perfectly reasonable, right? He says, like, that seems like a stupid idea because I'm just going to hurt an old man and they're going to hate me even more for it. And they're like, yeah, but it's a big marquee, it'll make money, it's an idea, blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay.
And they like throw in extra stuff of like, oh, well, if you don't beat him to a pulp, if you let him continue to breathe, then the fans will actually see you showing mercy, so you'll be a little bit more likable.
Yes. And then he says, it's your fault I'm not likable. You made this image of me. But they actually go and see Rocky at his restaurant kind of on their own to like sort of try and they say, hey, we've got this idea. You could do like this big, you know, just exhibition fight. And, you know, at worst, you'll have new stories to tell. You know, you'll have new stories to tell everyone. And that's basically it. Like, you know, like next thing we know, Rocky's like kind of signed up and that's it.
Well, I like Rocky's initial reaction because he's like, you want me to go up against the heavyweight champ? Look, when I got back into this, I was expecting to do like a couple little tiny things, you know, like local boxers, tiny itty bitty little things. And they're just like, oh yeah, no, it'll be totally tiny in the middle of the biggest place that we can get into Las Vegas, but like totally tiny.
Yes, and the location is going to be painted on the cleavage of several ring girls during the final fight.
So yeah, he basically is. They do the press conference, and all of the reporters are against both of them. Like they're going against Rocky by saying like, "Aren't you old? Why are you doing it? You're so old." And then they turn to the champ and just like, why are you beating up an old guy? Yeah. What are you hoping to get out of this?
It's like all of your fights have been easy, and this is, in theory, going to be even easier. Of course, because it's a Rocky movie, it's going to end up being his toughest fight ever. But
absolutely.
Like that's the idea, is that you're taking another easy fight, and he gets quite upset about that. He's all these, you know, they really sets the stage for what's to come.
And this is where Duke shows up as well. They have the panel, and we don't see who's on it except for Rocky and Paulie. And then as a question is asked, Duke like interjects and the camera pans over to him and shows him sitting there. I'm like, hell yeah, man, you're looking great.
Yeah, I think what I liked about this, I mean, I liked him coming back in general, but what I liked about this is that later on, just before the training montage, Duke just says, okay, you're not going to be as quick as you were before. We can't rely on that. You can't run that fast anymore. You've got arthritis in your knees. You've got this, you've got that. And I'm like, oh, how did he pass the test with flying colours with arthritis in his knees? I feel like that would disqualify him, but whatever, right? And he describes all these things, and he says, but the one thing you can still do, the last thing to go in a fighter, is the punch. If you can still pack a heavy punch, you can shake him. You can put the hurt on, and you can sort of whittle him down. You can't really necessarily last a long time, but for a couple of rounds, you might have enough energy to, you know, pummel on the head. And as much as he did end up going all 10 rounds in this case, I do really appreciate that they're like, okay, we're not going to pretend that he can fight the way he did before. He has to sort of accommodate for the fact that he is older, he's not as quick, he's not going to be able to have as much stamina or cardio or whatever. Like, I appreciate them at least bringing it up. Now, you know, he is a bit of a tank. He just sort of like takes a lot of hits in the fight later on, but that's been kind of par for the course with Rocky in some of his fights at this point. So,
no, yeah, absolutely. That's how he got his start. He just kept on taking the hits, and he's like, because remember that was first movie. I'm like, bro, you can put your hands up. Well, that's allowed.
I mean, that's the thing. So the son comes to see him after this is official, that the fight's happening. He's seen the press conference. Rocky Jr. comes to the restaurant and says, "Hey, Dad," and this is the first time he's been in the restaurant, because we didn't even mention. He promised he'd come to the restaurant when Rocky went to see him at his work, and then called and said he couldn't make it, and sort of lets Rocky down, disappoints him.
Yeah. So you just see Rocky's face drop, and then he goes on his memories of Adrian Lane. Yes.
So this is the first time he's actually stepped foot, but he's here for like a bad reason, which is to tell him not to do this. He doesn't want him to do the fight. And again, like, some of it does come from a place of concern, but there is definitely the other motives alongside that.
Oh yeah, pretty much everything, because this is the emotional breakdown scene. This is where he comes at him and it just basically says like, I've been overshadowed by you my entire life. I can't make a name for myself, and now you're going to go out there and at best you're going to continue to overshadow me. At worst, it's going to be an embarrassment for both of us. So please, as a favor to me, don't do this. And Rocky just fires back with like, stop blaming other people for the fact that you haven't done anything with your life, man.
Yeah, he does the whole, like, life's about, you know, how hard you can keep getting hit, but keep moving forward anyway. Gives a whole big speech, gets very passionate, and says, you're better than that. You're not someone who's a coward who'll just say that it's everyone else's fault, that you have to go and fight for what you want in the first place, and blah, blah, blah. And I think, like, it's a fine speech, but this is actually one of the other moments where I felt like the transition to, oh, we're just over this now, is too quick, because the very next scene is Rocky at Adrian's grave, and up comes walking Rocky Jr., who's like, I quit my job. it wasn't for me. I want to be with you. And they hug, and now he's just he's helping Rocky train. And I'm like, all right, I guess that was that overdone. We can move on now.
Yeah, that definitely feels like there are deleted scenes in the middle of that. But
it does.
I also kind of love the fact that like he comes in and Rocky's like, "Oh, you get off work early." He's like, "Actually, I quit." And I just wanted Rocky to be like, "That's not what I meant at all. You're literally trying to live in my shadow. Stop doing that."
Yeah, if anything feels like it's missing stuff, it's more stuff with Rocky Jr. like making these choices and like sort of like weighing on what his dad said to him. Maybe I could see there been scenes with his boss where his boss like belittles him again or something, and like it sort of motivates him to stand up for himself, and that being like the turning point for him. But whatever might have been there is not there. It just cuts immediately to him. I've quit my job. I'm coming to help you now. I'm like, all right, okay, that feels a bit quick, but we'll go with it.
We just needed him to be able to get away from work long enough to do a training montage. There's
also actually something else that feels like it was cut, is that once they're in the gym all together, right, and like Duke's making his big speech, talking to Rocky, there's a little moment where Rocky Jr. looks over to Steps, because Steps is on the team helping him train as well, and it looks like, oh, maybe this will be a bit of tension, and then Rocky Jr. just sort of smiles and gives him a nod, and then Steps smiles and nods back at him, and I felt like this feels like there was other scenes before this where you felt jealous that he had a new son.
Dude, I'll one up you. I think that the entirety of Steps' plot got deleted from this movie. They showed him picking out a dog, and that is it. He is gone.
Yeah, I could see that. But I do think it felt like, oh, maybe there was some like male jealousy, attention seeking going on before this, or something. I don't know, but it felt like an ending moment to me.
Oh yeah, no, it was definitely wrapping something up. Like they definitely had like a talk at some point. Like I don't know who was like heated in that debate, who was doing what. Oh, by the way, we skipped over this, but I need to go back to
go on. Yes, what is it?
The part, I believe it's when Paulie just got fired. It might have been earlier on than that, but Steps is in the restaurant.
Oh yeah, Paulie being racist again for no reason.
Just super racist for like no reason. He looks at Steps is leaving. Steps is like, "Hey Rocky, I'm gonna get going," and Rocky says bye, and then Paulie's like, who's the, I forget what exact term he used was, but he's
I think
like,
it was criminal. I think he said,
who's the criminal? And he's like, "Hey, Paulie, that's not cool." And he's like, "Whatever, I'm just saying, hide the silverware." And I'm like, Jesus Christ, Paul.
Yeah, he also makes a really stupid kind of racist joke as well about reservations, like because it's when Marie says, "Have you got a reservation?" and he chuckles and goes, "I'm no Indian." I'm like,
yeah.
Well, what is wrong? Like, Paulie, what are you doing? Like, just, I mean, it's true to character. He was racist as shit in Rocky 3, so I mean, I'm not surprised by it, but
you'd think that would be something he could ease up over just a little bit over time.
Yeah, it's like he's admitting that he wasn't the greatest brother to Adrian. It'd be nice if maybe he realized at some point, maybe he could be less of a shithead.
Yeah. Hopefully,
just a little bit.
Maybe that's why he got fired. Maybe he just has like a whole bunch of racist comments at the meatpacking factory.
Maybe, but training montage, that was the thing as well, is the theme kicked in, right? The fanfare kicked in, and I thought, wait, we're at the fanfare already? Usually there's like I can't do this montage first, right? And then you get the real training montage when he's finally been motivated.
Yeah, no, so this is, again, the structural problems for me. The moment that I think is the second inciting incident is the moment where they approach him and say, "Hey, do you want to do this in Vegas?" Because like you said, almost immediately afterwards he signs. That happens just before the hour mark. The training montage happens 1 hour and 8 minutes in. So there is only 8 minutes between the inciting incident and we're doing it. We're reaching the peak of our training montage. And it's so strangely paced to me.
Yeah, like I said, it makes like 2 or 3 of these key pivotal character changes or moments or decisions feel like they just happen suddenly between shots or between scenes, I should say, and that's one of them. So yeah, we're already at the training montage. Everything's going whatever.
Yep.
They have him running with his dog. Again, it's the old dog, just like Rocky. He's an old dog, and they run together. We see him training with weights and doing all sorts of things.
They go back to the meat packing place and he punches the meat.
Yep. Yeah, beats some meat. David's favorite.
Which I'm not entirely sure how they got in there, considering Paulie doesn't work there anymore, but whatever.
He didn't give his key back.
Yeah, that's fair. Probably didn't.
And that's pretty much it. I did appreciate at one point Polly lifted up a weight and just sort of did one and then looks at Hildy's side like, oh no, that was a bad idea.
He's like, oh, yep, that is not Polly's job.
I'm never doing that again.
Lights up a cigar, says a racist comment. That's all he's got to do.
Yeah, I did like actually in the fight, like at the end, like just before round 10 starts, which is the last round in this case, which I appreciate. It's not 15 now. We're going to make it shorter because there's an old man fighting.
Yeah,
10's enough. But I like that at the last round, Paulie just yells at him, "This is the last round of your life. This isn't just the last round of this match." He says, "This is your last round. Make it count."
I mean, I get what he's saying, and from like an emotional standpoint, it hits. It does a really good job of that. But at the same time, like, he just got his boxing license back. He could just do that plan where he was fighting smaller timers for like a while after this.
Yeah, but it's also the last time he's going to fight in a movie, so it's like it works on a meta level. So just go with it.
I mean, that's the thing. If you really look at the timeline of this movie, he gets his boxing license, he takes on the heavyweight champ, and then he retires. Like, good on him, I guess.
Dude. I mean, it kind of mirrors his real boxing career in the sense that he just shot up to fighting. I mean, I know he had lots of little local fights, but it was like he just gets shot to the champion, and then that's it. He's in that. He's that type of contender now for his whole career until he retires. So yeah, but yeah, he runs up the steps, all the usual malarkey.
And then we cut to the weigh-in, and we see basically the champ gets him afterwards, and it's just like, hey, look, I'll carry you through the fight. Like, I'm not gonna make it like, oh yeah, you want to go the distance, so be it. But like, if you try to start taking me out, I will knock your ass out.
Yeah, he says that none of us need to get hurt. This is just kind of for fun. So it's kind of the like, and it kind of parallels Apollo in a weird way because Apollo didn't take that original fight seriously, but here it's a bit different in that it's like, no, you're an old man. I don't actually want to hurt you, and there's no reason for you to try and hurt me. But if you try and actually like play dirty or really try and hurt me, I will properly hit you. Like, I'm not, you know, I'll defend myself, but there's no reason for this to be like anything other than just a fun exhibition.
I mean, that's kind of the reason I think it might have been named Rocky Balboa rather than Rocky 6, is because it does have a lot of mirroring to the original Rocky in how the fight takes place. It's an exhibition. People are underestimating Rocky, and then all he's trying to do is just prove that he's not completely worn out, that he is able to just go the distance. So yeah, and that's kind of the only real intrigue we get for the fight itself, I would say, is this exchange. And it's not heated in any way, and I'm not saying it should be. You know, Rocky, like, at worst is maybe a little miffed that this guy thinks he just has to carry him, and Rocky basically wants to prove that he doesn't need carried. Like, you know, this is still, he's going to take it seriously as a real fight, and we'll go from there. But like I said, yeah, Marie like shows up and gives him a photo of Adrian for good luck the night before, whatever it is. Can I also just say, I really noticed it when I was watching this, and I've seen it in Vegas before, but that beam of light coming off the pyramid like was really strong. Like, oh, the Luxor,
yeah. I'm like, does it actually just look like a bat signal all the time? Because that's what it looked like.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, with how much, you know, car exhaust and stuff like that, it's a very visible thing because the air is so actual cloudy.
I'm just thinking, like, how much energy are we wasting on this stupid beam of light? Dude,
there is now a giant LED sphere in Vegas on all the time. Energy is not a concern for Vegas.
The energy that feeds Vegas, like, extraneous lights could probably power, like, 2 other cities, like entirely.
I think it could fund most of Africa.
So, yeah, I mean, like, you know, they get introduced. Like I said, Michael Buffer's there. We get the Ready to Rumble, all that. Rocky comes out first to Paulie's choice of song.
It's a choice. It's Frank Sinatra, but it's very lighthearted and like whimsical sounding music.
Yeah,
and I will say this entire sequence, not the walkout part, but like, or not the behind the walkout part, I should say, right before they leave, but everything after he walks out is shot like it is a pay-per-view match. Like, it is very mobile cameras, and then when they're in the ring, it's stationary, and you're just following back and forth.
It's not until it starts to montage after round 2 and we start getting the more flashy kind of like, oh, it's black and white, but the blood and the yellow on his clothes or the blue in the other guy's clothes are still in color. So it does that, and that's kind of stylish. But yeah, the first 2 rounds and then the last round, they treat it like, no, this is just real footage from pay-per-view. And like I kind of appreciate it in some cases, but honestly, like I know what a Rocky fight's supposed to look like, so like it does feel a bit off in a sense, but like it almost feels more dated because of it. I mean, it's dated at a later date, but it feels more dated because it feels so 2006.
No, I get what you're saying. It makes it feel more realistic, but it does ground it very specifically at a portion of time where things looked that way on TV.
So, yeah, regardless though, round one, like Rocky takes a lot of hits, but he eventually hits back a little bit. Like he does get knocked down, I think twice in this first round, where he starts, or maybe that's round two, but he gets counted and he gets up back up both times. And I think something we have to emphasize here is that the crowd are booing Dixon and they are cheering for Rocky. They're chanting Rocky's name, and it very much is more like a wrestling match than as far as the crowd's concerned. They sound more like a wrestling audience than they do a boxing audience.
All right, so just to give a little bit of backstory on this.
Okay.
When they were planning out how to film this and photography and all that, this was obviously going to be a problem of like, okay, how do we get this many extras and how do we get a ring and stuff like that? And turns out that there was a actual pay-per-view event going on in Vegas, and they basically just hijacked that crowd for the night. So like the pay-per-view event, they did their thing, the boxes went on and all that, and then everyone was basically told like, okay, now we're going to be filming a Rocky movie, and we'd like you guys to stick around and like cheer and stuff. So they brought it in, and they didn't give any sort of direction to the crowd. Like they were hoping that like, you know, the crowd would react well, but like the chants of Rocky, that was all the crowd. Nobody told them to do that. Like the crowd was the one who was like, of course we want to cheer for Rocky. It's a Rocky movie. And it just kind of works for the plot, you know?
Yeah. No, that makes sense to me, because I know when they were doing scenes for that Fighting with My Family that Florence Pugh did about a wrestler, they literally did the same thing where after a wrestling event, they went out and filmed some scenes and said, hey, crowd, stick around and be in the background of a movie so that we've got a good crowd shot.
That's fair. Which makes me wonder, did they particularly pull Mike Tyson in for this movie, or was he already at that boxing event? Was like, yeah, I'll be in a Rocky movie.
I don't know. That's a good question. But you know, like the fight's all right. It's like I don't think it has quite the same drama as some of the previous ones. You know, I kind of like that. Get into the final round once we get to that point. Like Dixon, when they step into the middle of the ring, look at each other. Dixon clearly is sort of now respects him and says, "You're a crazy ass old man." And you know, I don't even think I heard what Rocky said in return, but like regardless,
Rocky says, "You'll get there eventually."
But it kind of feels like, you know, like it was more just that, you know, Rocky still on his feet punching when the bell rings, rather than the movie never even pretends that there's a chance he's going to knock him out. There's a chance Rocky's going to win. It never even feels like that, I don't think.
I mean, you say that, but that was the one point of like where I thought there was actual drama. It was the end of round 2 where he does manage to knock down Dixon for the first time. He does manage to get him down on the mat. And Dixon's down for a good like 6-7 count. It's not like he immediately jumps back up. And you can like immediately you feel the like change of Dixon's demeanor. He's just like, okay, all right, no more holding back.
Yeah. So I almost wish Dixon was a more fleshed out character, because it feels like in many ways he has like a more interesting arc almost, in the sense that this is about him realizing he's got a chance to prove himself in front of everyone, and even if everyone else is just going to say Rocky's an old man, he knows it is actually the toughest fight he's had. So he's challenged in a way that he's not. But like, I think there's some interesting stuff there that they could have played with if they. And again, maybe the 2.5 hour cut did explore some of this a bit more. Who knows? But
no, I'm all in on the idea of what if Apollo Creed was just unlikable. Like, what if the crowd didn't like him? And it wasn't about him just doing an exhibition match for the hell of getting some ratings boost. It's actually about like earning back that likability and trying to get people back on his side. And that's super interesting to me. And there was one scene that honestly we skipped over of him going and talking to his like original trainer way back at the beginning of the movie. And they give a little bit of backstory on like why, you know, he is unliked and what he can do to try to fix it. But ultimately, that's all you get out of the character. So as much as there may have been some depth there, they just kind of forgot about it by the time we get here.
Yeah, it's a bit thin, sadly. It could definitely be more fleshed out. It definitely feels like a character that would add a lot to the final fight if we did maybe even care about what he was fighting for as well, to like give it a bit of duality. But I mean, as it is, the fight is fairly well shot. It's got some nice moments. I think when the music kicks in, you know, as soon as the bell rings, it's that sort of end of the fight music starts.
Yeah, the fanfare.
Yeah. And I actually, a detail here that I really like is that Rocky doesn't wait in the ring to hear the result. He doesn't care. It's not about the result. He just starts getting out with all of his family, and he's waving goodbye. And the little touch as well that he's trying to like wave goodbye and leave, and Paulie and his son say, no, turn round and like hold your hands up one last time.
Yeah,
and,
take it in.
Yeah. So like that stuff's all nice. And the final scene of the movie is him back at Adrian's grave where he kneels down and says, you know, yo, Adrian, we did it.
Yeah.
And puts flowers on her grave and walks off. And they do a thing here where he actually, like, you know, he does that sort of fading away as he walks off. And it really does feel like this is the last time he thought you're ever going to see Rocky in a movie. Yeah. That's not true, of course. We have something else much later. But
we thought that with Rocky 5 as well. Like, we keep doing this.
Yeah. It's just kind of a weird historical thing now that because Creed exists and Creed does, like, it's just such a compelling movie and it's such a fitting, like, place for Rocky to go as a character that, like, if you ignored this existed, and I'm not saying you should because it's a perfectly fine watchable movie that has some nice moments, but if you ignored this one existed, it would feel like a nice natural, like, oh, this is where Rocky, you know, ends up. I mean, yeah, when you watch Creed, he has his restaurant, and obviously that was introduced here, but it's not like it takes that much explaining. He owns a restaurant. Like, done. Like, yeah, it works.
It takes just as much explaining as it is to say, you can ignore Rocky 5 for this movie. Like,
to be fair, though, Rocky at one point does say home team to his son, which is a Rocky 5 thing. Yeah.
I missed it. All right.
Fair enough. He says, I thought we could be home team. He says that.
All right. Well, then explain to me why he doesn't own Mickey's Gym anymore.
Do you know what? That is actually a good question. I did not think of that.
Yeah, they even go by it. They're like, oh, look, it's run down. It's like, bro, you own it. Fix it up. Do it.
Again, the 2.5 hour cut might have brought some light on that. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. But no, I appreciate how it ended, though. Obviously, you know, end of the fight, it does mirror the Apollo Creed from Rocky 1, where it is a split decision, but Rocky ends up being the loser of the fight. But because he won for his own personal moral reasons, like, he still is the winner, especially as the crowd, everybody, as the winner's being announced, everyone is still chanting Rocky's name. Yeah. So obviously he's the real winner here. Yeah. There is one or two obvious green screen shots, because obviously when they shot stuff in front of the crowd, they only had so much time in one night. So there is a couple of shots where if you're sort of looking for it, you can see, oh, this is like a green screen crowd behind Rocky towards the end kind of thing. Yeah. Not when he's going down like the walkway, because that's a much small, that will just be a small group of extras around the edges, but more just there's a moment where he's in the ring, I think after he's hugged someone, it has that kind of look to it. I recognize it vividly from Ted Lasso, because Ted Lasso used this a lot because they'd have those football games and they'd have to have crowds in the background, but it was always green screened because, you know, it was a TV show. They couldn't get, you know, thousands of extras for episodes of a show. Yeah, that makes sense. So, no. But yeah, not a bad movie by any stretch. Perfectly enjoyable, but definitely not as tight on a script level as Rocky is, and not as fun as a Rocky 3 or 4, I would say, you know, in terms of entertainment. So it falls between the cracks a little bit in that sense. Yeah, it's weird, because I would say you could view Rocky 1 and Rocky 2 as kind of a pair in terms of how they should be received and how they were made. I think that Rocky 3 and 4 are another pair. They're a bit more fun and lighthearted. Rocky 5 exists. No, Rocky 5 and Balboa are a pair as well, and this is an apology for Rocky 5. That's fair. Yeah, you watch Rocky 5 and then you immediately get the, oops, sorry, ignore that. But no, I think that this one is... It's weird because not only do I feel like it is almost a pairing with Rocky 1 again, like, again, it mirrors a lot of the plot. It is supposed to be viewed more as this heavier drama character thing rather than the fight being the main thing that we're supposed to care about. But at the same time, it is standing on its own because it is such a nostalgia piece of looking back over the Rocky franchise as a whole and just saying, this is it, our final goodbye. Like, we look at all the things we've done, look how far we've come, except for Rocky 5. So it's interesting in that it is its own little standalone thing, and it makes sense coming out so long after everything else as well that it would be. But it's, I don't know, I do get some enjoyment out of this. I think that as much as it is supposed to be this heavier piece, it delivers on this emotional punch by the end that I think it was aiming for. It's just, I don't know, maybe trim it up a little. I know you already trimmed out like 45 minutes of this movie, but like the first bit of it is just so poorly paced that it's bringing down the rest of the movie by default.
Yeah. So with all that said, what is your scene of the movie?
I mean, as I just said, I can't give it to anything within like the first hour of the movie. I don't think there's anything there that really wins it out. I think that as I was watching this, I felt, you know, through musical manipulation and whatnot, through the fact that they were using very clear arc words and getting this emotional punch to work, but also just through the visuals. I really enjoyed that little montage bit of the fight where like things occasionally go black and white. They show like little glimpses over to like Adrian's grave as Rocky's getting punched. It feels like what the montage of Rocky 5 was supposed to be. Like every time that it cut away to like Mickey like talking or whatever, that's the kind of mood that this was actually accomplishing. So no, I really like the stylistic choices they made there, and it packed the most emotional punch out of the entire movie. So I'll give it to that, hands down.
Yeah, I think I could go with the end of the fight, because the end of the fight is pretty good. Like, when I say the end, I mean the aftermath, really, more than the actual fight itself.
Right. The walking out.
Yeah.
So.
But part of me does want to go with the scene where he has to convince Marie to actually take the job, because I thought it just did a good job of actually bringing out some key themes back from Rocky 1 in her character, and it kind of said why he was, you know, it kind of made it clear why he feels the need to try and help her, because he recognizes some of that self-doubt that he once had. So I think in terms of writing, it's maybe my favorite scene in the movie. So I'm going to pick that.
Okay. No, that's fair. I mean, that there is one little bit to that scene that I wanted to bring up and I just forgot. Rocky comes up to her door, knocks on it, and he's got the dog along with, and he's just knocking on the door. She comes out just like, oh, Rocky, hey, do you want to come in? And he's like, no, I got to walk the dog. Do you want to come with me? And she's like, sure, I guess. It's like, yeah, Rocky, you just show up to people's houses and say, come on, walk with me.
But yeah, so MVP of the movie, David.
Ah, boy, this one is a lot tougher for me. I don't feel like any particular person's acting was super standout for me. I'd say the best one was probably honestly Stallone. I think that Rocky may have been the best performance in this movie, but there's certain scenes in this that like the emotional talk with his son where he's given like the whole shebang on like, you know, do your best, don't blame anybody else, whatever. That whole scene just felt like really stilted to me, despite the fact it was supposed to be like the emotional big breakout moment between him and his son. But then you add in other moments like the time where he's talking to Maria and like the Jamaica in Europe line. He gets like an actual, he's endearing in this movie. I think that that's something that I really have always enjoyed about Rocky's character, is how endearing he is and how he feels like he just relates to anybody. And this comes through here. So I think by default, I have to give it to Stallone as Rocky, but like there are some little caveats to that of it isn't like there's a lot of competition here.
Okay. I'm going with Polly's robot because Polly's robot is the one simulating the fight on TV. So that's that's the robot back at the data center processing all this data and
damn, man, they got some upgrades.
I know, I kid. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it probably is Stallone. You know, I mean, I do think Polly has little moments of reflection. What little they are quite interesting. That little line about not being good to his sister, I did think was a nice little moment. But
yeah,
I think Rocky probably does obviously just have more. So I'll go with Rocky.
I was fully like, because Paulie, that's one of his first lines in the movie is his little breakdown about Adrian and all that. I thought for sure Paulie was going to steal the show with this one. And then they just didn't give him anything to do, and then he just made a bunch of racist remarks. And it's like, all right, never mind, Paulie. You always open the movie strong and then throw it away.
Every time you think it's going to focus more on Paulie, the movie just says, nope, David, you're wrong.
I'm waiting for Creed 4 to just be like, this is now Paulie's movie.
Burt Young passed away like a year or two ago, so I don't think that's happening. But
hey, man, as we learned in Alien Romulus, nobody's ever truly dead.
Okay. All right, what are you rating Rocky Balboa?
Oh boy, this is the tougher part. So I definitely think it is above 5. That's not even a question. I don't think anybody would debate that. The question then becomes, do I think that the emotional impact that it delivered, that I think it did a really good job with, is worth more to me than the general enjoyability that 3 and 4 gave? And I'm not sure how to answer that. I think that regardless, I still have to dock a point just because you go an hour before the inciting incident, really. It's too much. It's just too poorly structured of a pace. As much as I love the emotional impact of the final scene, I think that I can't ignore the poor pacing problems leading up to it.
I think I would still count the simulated fight as the inciting incident, but I would describe that's the second one that you're calling it. I would say that's like when the main character actually becomes aware that the movie has a plot that it wants him to be involved in. Right. But the inciting incident for all the other characters is absolutely the simulated fight. So
yeah. So overall, I do have to dock at a point there. So I think it is going to fall just a little bit below the enjoyability of the 80s movies. And I'm probably going to give it, I think a 6.5 sounds fair. I think that that's right about where I'm feeling for it.
Actually, that's exactly the number I was thinking. I think it's not quite just good, because to me a 7 is good, and I think this just falls a bit short with some writing that does feel like there's some holes in it, and maybe that's because it got cut down after a big long edit or whatever.
Right.
But there's a few things that just feel a bit clunkier, and I don't quite feel as invested in the fight itself. But there are some nice big emotional beats and payoffs, things that feel like a nice sort of goodbye to certain parts of the Rocky lore, or whatever you want to call it. But, you know, I wouldn't say it's as good as Rocky 1, 2, 3, or 4 for various different reasons. You know, it's not always for the same reasons, but for various different reasons. I think they're all superior in one way or another. That said, obviously it's head and shoulders above 5. That's not even a not even a question. So not a bad sort of last hurrah nostalgia movie, but I wouldn't say it quite justifies itself in its own, if that makes sense, if that's even such a thing. However, Creed absolutely does. Now, Creed sequels, that may be a different story, but Creed absolutely does. Now, we're not doing that just now. We will be doing the Creed movies whenever Creed 4 is upon us. We wanted to get the Rocky franchise done so that we didn't have to do 10 movies in a row when the time came. So I was happy to get through this. It's nice to get through one of the big classic franchises. Because despite this show kind of revolving around doing, you know, seasons of movies and franchises, I feel like we've not actually done that many actual franchises. We've done a lot of, like, other things that have you know, grouped movies together rather than franchises. So it was nice to get...
We got Rocky, Ghostbusters, Home Alone, Expendables, Indiana Jones, John Wick, the first half of the Fast franchise, if we're ever going to come back to that.
Eventually.
Turtles, Dirty Harry, and Santa Claus.
Okay, that first year was a bit more. I don't feel like we've done a lot of franchises this year, though.
Nah, definitely not.
It's been, you know, disaster season this, disaster season that, dance movie season.
Just Ghostbusters. Because Home Alone is technically last year, so...
Yeah. So just and it's just nice to get back to a franchise. But as always, after a franchise or after a season, I should say, we will take 1 week off, so there'll be no episode next week. Don't worry, there'll still be a Screams After Midnight. There'll still be an Atomic Cinema Experiment. But after next week, we'll be starting off our next season, which is a vote-winning season from Patreon, and that is 90s erotic thrillers. It'll be an 8-episode season with... Oh, sorry, 7-episode season. I'm miscounting. 7-episode season with, honestly, all the big erotic thrillers of the 90s.
Yep.
So
be ready to hear a bunch of guys on the internet talking about sex scenes for an extended period of time. Real quick, though, I need to interject.
Oh, yeah?
Does Rocky Balboa make the cut?
I always forget we do that.
We always forget. It's literally been nearly 100 episodes, and we have never changed the format.
Oh, I did. Technically, I added a new thing to the format just recently.
Yes, you did. Okay, so your thing you never forget.
Yes, it's more important.
All right, so I will make the argument. I will put forward. I feel that Rocky Balboa is cutting it close. I think it's right on the line.
No, I think that's fair.
It's in the middle.
I think it's absolutely a cutting it close. I think if you're a Rocky fan, you probably have it because it goes nicely with the other ones. But I don't think on its own it's making the cut. It's a cutting it close.
Yeah, that's fair. That being said, you know how every once in a while in comic books, like if they add a new thing to a collection much later on, they'll sell you a slipcase and then just the one book, so that way you don't have to buy the whole collection again. Do they do that with DVDs?
Do they not? No. They make you buy the whole set again if you want the box set.
Yeah. It just feels like such a little cop out there to be like, oh yes, you had Rocky 5 for 16 years and now you got to go out and get another one.
What's worse is they did a 4K Blu-ray box set of just Rocky 1 through 4 a couple of years ago, and now this year they've done 4Ks of 5 and Balboa, so now they're doing a 6-movie box set, and I'm like, why would anyone buy it? Even though 1 to 4 are all arguably the best ones, right. I don't understand why you'd buy that, knowing full well that as soon as they get around to doing 5 and 6, you have to buy it again.
Well, because if nobody bought the 1 through 4, they would never get around to doing the 5 through 6.
That's the sad truth of it. Yes, it's an awkward thing. Anyway, so yes, 90s Erotic Thrillers season starts with the next episode, which will be not next week, but the week after. And of course, you can get bonus content over on Patreon. Patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. There's bonuses for the other shows as well, but me and David do 2 exclusive shows over there that might tickle your fancy. One is Criterion Cut, where we do movies from the Criterion Collection, and the other one at the $5 tier and up is Extra Reels, where we do some of the worst things ever made. Sometimes so bad they're good, sometimes not. Just misery, whatever it may be. So, yeah, you can check out that. Or you can do YouTube memberships if that's more your thing. I always recommend Patreon because you get everything on Patreon, whereas YouTube memberships are split up by movie and TV content. But whatever your thing, preference is, by all means go for it. Any support is greatly appreciated, and it's what helps all the shows keep coming. So, thank you very much for joining us. That is everything. That's Rocky season done and dusted.
Yep.
So we will see you next time for some steamy leg crossing.
And uncrossing.
And uncrossing. I mean, yeah, the first movie, actually, I never mentioned it, but it is Basic Instinct. That is the first movie of the season. So look forward to that. So thank you very much. Keep watching movies. We will see you next time. And if you can get it, it's always nice to have diplomatic immunity.